Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. As you're coming in the webinar room, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping right before we introduce our guest. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and could not be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars, such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. Well, we are thrilled to bring you this educational presentation today. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and I do need to turn that feature on. So you should be able to chat or comment in the chat box now. If you ask a question in the chat box and we're not able to get to it, please leave your contact information as well, and we will be happy to reach out to you after today's event. Make sure that gets addressed. Otherwise, we will try to address as many questions as possible during the webinar, and we do have a question and answer session at a question and answer portion at the end of our presentation today. I'd love to introduce you to our presenter today. Michael Petrosky is an accredited wealth management advisor at Limestone Wealth Management, which offers their clients a comprehensive solution to their financial concerns of retirement, savings, and protecting against a myriad of what ifs in life. The practice is based out of Louisville, Kentucky. About his introduction into the world of finances, Michael said, "When I was a kid, my grandparents would give us stocks and bonds for Christmas and birthdays. So naturally, I was fascinated watching how $1 could turn into $2. I always enjoyed helping people, and I'd say I fell into this career after meeting my former branch manager at a career fair." Michael originally went to college intending to go into the youth ministry and pastoral care, and Christian service is still an important part of his life. So Michael, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, and I'm excited to get started.
Awesome. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me on this webinar. Hopefully you take something away from it. A mentor of mine told me at one point, as long as you can experience and learn one thing from a meeting, a sermon, a group session like this, take it home and apply it. It was a valuable use of your time. So hopefully you can learn something from this today. When it comes to working with a financial advisor, planning kind of comes at a key. It's the base for how we set up what we're doing, how we work with individual clients on an ongoing basis. Some of the things here listed, identifying your goals. Hopefully at the end of a financial planning conversation, that process will bring you some peace of mind, letting you know that you can sleep well. Doing what you're doing is hopefully going to get you from point A to point B. A lot of the responsibilities that financial advisors take is really holding people's hands, keeping them calm through the storms, letting them not get too excited on the ups, not too worried on the downs, because this is a long process. I recently heard that if you're alive in 2030, the chances of you living to 100 are greater than ever. So we have a long glide path we need to take into consideration. That also means that if something happens in 6 months, it doesn't mean the world is coming to an end. So if you're not currently working with an advisor, seek someone out, find someone that you trust, that you have a good relationship with, that you can have a good conversation with, because it'll be a long-term relationship. When it comes to financial planning, we kind of look at it from a pyramid perspective. At the basis of a good financial plan is all about protection. Your biggest asset isn't your home. It's not your 401k. It's not your checking account maybe, but it's you. You are your greatest asset. So we need to make sure that we are protecting you, whether that's in the form of life insurance, form of disability insurance, or just some other type of catastrophic insurance, because if something happened to you, all the other plans, retirement, sending kids to college, having that vacation home, all go up in smoke. So at a basis, we need to make sure that you are protected. Second from that is identifying your goals and making some plans for that. It also takes into consideration your cash flow. People use this phrase all the time. Cash is king. While that's true, cash flow is queen. And if the queen ain't happy, everything else is going to go out the window. So I want to make sure that you take into consideration your cash flow, because everything comes back to that. I've got a great presentation that you can find on the web that goes through a very basic cash flow tool to help you understand your basic cash flow and take control of it in this electronic age that we're in. The next step up from there will be portfolio management, making sure that your investments are structured the right way and are in tune with what you're comfortable with from a risk as well as a time frame perspective. And lastly, we start to address the estate planning. A lot of estate planning can start just basically making sure that you have the proper beneficiaries on your accounts and your assets. As we get into more complex situations, estate planning becomes much more complex, and there's pretty creative ways that you can make sure that what you want to have happen past the grave actually happens. So when you're developing a financial plan, these are the steps that you want to walk through. Initially, make sure that the protection is there, identify the goals beyond that, the 2 and 3 year goals, as well as the 10 and 15 year goals. Address the portfolio construction, make sure that it fits what you're comfortable with. And then lastly, as I mentioned, estate planning. So we're going to go through a couple of different case studies today. Hopefully they're going to be different but unique. Some of them might apply to you. Some of them might need more complex planning. And if that's the case, again, it's a great reason to talk to a financial advisor about that. But we'll kind of kick it off here. We'll start with Robert and Jennifer. Let me go to the next slide for me. Thank you. Just a quick understanding of what Robert and Jennifer are looking at. Dual income family. Robert makes about $85,000 a year. Jennifer around 65. They have 2 kids. In grade school, they're wanting to do some kind of college savings, hopefully. They also want to make sure that they're on track for saving for retirement. And currently, they have about $2,000 of surplus they can put towards these financial goals. Of the retirement plan, their initial goals would be to retire at 64, have around $6,000 a month in today's income, plan for college, and then really, what if something happens? So those are the kind of what we're going to try to solve for. And I'm going to bring us into their financial plan, and we'll start talking about that right now.
And I will just interject here. These are not actually your clients. We made these up for the specific, webinar today. So we aren't invading anyone's privacy, but you see things that are typical of this, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. These aren't actual clients. I did fabricate these to protect the innocent. In addition to that, there's going to be some things that might be missing from here that would probably be included on a financial plan that you do with your client. So for example, I didn't include the fact that they own a home, mostly because we're talking 60 years out from now. Chances are the house is going to be paid off, or they're renting. So we're just kind of addressing the main goals right here. So as it stands, based on their goals, what they're telling me, where they are, this is what their life looks like. They did have some savings already to start. So being in their mid-30s, they had some money saved, but based on what they're currently doing, 5% contributions to their 401k, they're on track for a 30% probability of success. Now, that's not good. We want them to be in the 80s to 85, 90s and beyond. So we're going to kind of jump in and talk about what they would look like and what we can do to get them hopefully to that higher confidence level. So there's a number of different tools that are out there in the marketplace. We use a particular one that allows us to give what I like to call a play area for clients so they can do their own what ifs. So we start out here and say, okay, what can we do? What can we do different? We have about a $2,000 surplus that we can start doing something with. What can we do differently to get them to a higher level of success? Well, first thing I like to do with anyone at the age that they're at is I like to get a Roth IRA started. we can max out our Roth IRA every year, that is going to be your best bucket of money that you could possibly get in. Tax-free growth for the rest of your life. I can't believe the government actually did that for us, but thank God they did. So what if that happens? What if we just started maxing out our Roth IRAs? Where does that take us? Oh, pretty good. It almost doubled our probability of success just by simply saving in a Roth IRA. So the other things that we look at are, what if we need a certain amount of money? What if we want to retire at a certain age? Well, we've got some surplus still, so let's bump up our contributions to our 401ks to 10%. What does that look like? Okay, a little bit of improvement, not too bad. More than double our probability of original success. So being this far out in retirement, being 30 something years out, we like to think about what you really need in income. And it's important to kind of see what your spending habits impact your long-term success. If we just changed their income need by $500 in retirement, we got almost a 10% increase in their success ratio. And that's something significant to think about because it's so easy in this day and age for money just to fall through the cracks. I mentioned before, cash flow is so important, so crucial, making sure that you understand your budget, understanding how your money is being spent and working for you. It's important as it is now as it will be in retirement, just like you can see. So we're still trying to get into that probabilities of 85% or more. So what happens if we start thinking about retiring a little bit later? Better, much better, almost at 80%. What if we just retired to 66? In the 80s, fantastic. What this is going to give us is the conversation then, sit down with the client and say, how much is that 2 years important to you? Are you willing to make more sacrifice today so that you can retire at 64? Or are you okay with pushing it out to 66? Just some things to think about. One of the things that this tool also allows us to do is look at savings, education. Right now, the plan to send both of their kids, Aiden and Sarah, to college, they haven't got anything saved. We know that the average cost of college is only going up. We can be very specific with specific schools, but just using a national average, where are we and what are we doing? Right now we have no current contributions, but what if we started saving on an annual basis, $3,000? Well, let me go back to the other screen. It paints the picture a little better. Wrong box. The success rate comes back over. Apparently the details, where are we? Why are we not seeing the proposed? Oh, I know why. Forgive me, guys.
That's okay. As you're getting that up, it's interesting to see that you would start with, okay, let's make sure your retirement's solid first, and then let's look back at education. Is that a typical strategy?
That's a really good question. The conversation that I have around that is, if you could only pick one, what's the most important to you? Are you okay with, why am I not getting this right? I'm sorry, this is giving me the issues that it's given me. Usually this throws in there the but to your question, the larger question is going to be, what's more important? Are you willing to accept the fact that you might have to retire later? Or are you okay with your kids basically taking on some debt early on, and maybe you can help them out down the road? If we're at a shortfall, typically what I suggest for folks to think about is tell your kids that you're going to pay for the second 2 years of college. Let them know early on that the first two, they've got skin in the game. If the money's available and you can kind of help out and solve for that problem early on, great. But if they're expecting it, it kind of makes that conversation difficult later on. So typically I say, let's plan on paying for the second two. And then for the first two, the kids are going to be kind of on board. So we'll kind of jump back and go to that next slide
Mhm.
in the slide deck.
Yep, here we are.
So the recommendations here would be increase 401k contributions to 10%, max out from now on our Roth IRAs, start saving something for college, even if we can't take care of the whole shoot match, we at least get that. And then lastly, I always like to bring up term insurance and with folks. I'm a big fan of term insurance. It's inexpensive. It covers a very, very important need, especially when there's kids at home. Just ran some quick numbers just to see, for those of you who would be curious, a 20-year term insurance policy for $750,000 would only be around $53 for Robert and about $41 for Jennifer a month. So again, fits inside of their goals of having $2,000 a month surplus and trying to make sure that everyone's taken care of in the case that something bad does happen.
We had a good question. Did the analysis that you put together, did that include Social Security benefits as one of the income sources in retirement?
Yes, it does. Again, every tool is going to be a little different. So in this situation, we can break down and kind of show how everything comes into play. I look here at cash flows. We look at the summary. We go down here into retirement inflows. It'll actually show us where we get Social Security. So yes,
Okay.
it does factor in inflation adjusted Social Security. I like to use 1% on inflation and on income, higher inflation on expenses. It's a plan for the worst, expect best scenario. Rather be conservative, but yes, it does. This does factor in Social Security. Social Security, more often than not, winds up being a large portion of the retirement scenario for a lot of folks. We can definitely exclude that in the plans. Some people think it's going to be around, some people don't. A lot of argument around that right now. I tend to lean on the side of partially is going to be there.
All right. And we had another question I think is important to address. In this planning software, is it also taking into account inflation?
Yes. We do I always used a 3% inflation gauge. Historically, the Fed's always told us to use 2. Historically, it's been lower than that. I've always erred on the side of higher than that. So I typically use a 3% annual inflation on pretty much everything. I know right now, this day and age today, it's
3% would be a dream, right?
Right. But yeah, Jay Powell's always kind of said he was going to let inflation run hot. His goal was to let it run above the 2% target for a while. I don't think he ever expected it to get to this level. But yes, inflation is definitely built into this tool.
All right, that's great. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So let's talk about our next scenario.
Yeah. So next scenario, Dan and Alice, empty nesters. Dan makes about, where's the numbers? I think I was on a different slide. He's a healthcare manager at a major insurance company here in town. He has 401k. Alice is a teacher. Will have a pension. She also has a 401k as well. They're 10 years out from retirement, and they feel like a little bit behind the 8 ball. So what are some things that we can do? Let me jump over to the other plan before I bring that on.
I just realized I was mute, and I'm assuming that you see people in all age ranges. So people, in their 30s, people in their 40s, 50s, 60s. Financial planning is valuable at any point in life, correct?
That's very true. Whether you're 40 years out, 2 years out, or 10 years out, having at least an idea is important. Now, I will say this: we're using some common scenarios where people are. There are circumstances where financial planning gets very creative and very elaborate, using tools that 95% of people wouldn't necessarily need in the average environment. I tend to think that there's not a product out there in the marketplace that's bad. However, I believe there's the wrong fit for a lot of products. So while I don't necessarily use things like annuities and permanent life insurance with everyone's situation, there are definitely circumstances where they make sense and they fit. But to think that permanent life insurance is the end all be all, to me, it's not a fiduciary standard. It's not something that we lead with in conversation. But there are times when it's appropriate. So planning gets elaborate, gets creative, but for the scenarios that we're painting today, these are just going to be some typical clients that that I see on a regular basis come in and ask these kind of questions. So talk about Dan and Alice, just kind of give you a profile perspective. Dan makes around 90,000 a year. Alice has a income of around 55. We know that as a teacher, she will have a pension. Right now, we're estimated to be about $2,000 a month. From a savings standpoint, they've been good savers their whole career. They have about $600,000 in savings. Still a little bit of a loan left on the house, so we'll talk about what that looks like and how we can kind of tackle that and what that looks like in the end. Let's dive into that part first. When it comes to the mortgage, what are some things that we could do? As it stands right now, this green is their current scenario, and they'll be paying the house off in roughly 10 years, right about the same time as they retire, which is great. But what if we just put a little bit extra? If we just put an extra $350 a month towards their mortgage, brought their mortgage payment up to about $1,000, it's going to shave off about a little over 4 years and save them around $5,000, $6,000 in interest. The question mark that I kind of throw in here, though, what a lot of folks say is, I got to replace a vehicle at some point. What do I do with the surplus? Sometimes it's important to take that surplus and put it towards retirement savings. Other times, it's important to put that someplace that you're going to have to replace a vehicle. Now, depending on where you live, unless you live in a major city where public transportation is the most common form, anywhere else in the country, you're going to have some form of a car payment, whether you like it or not, whether you're putting money into a savings account that you're going to cash in all of a sudden, or whether you're going to go to a bank and borrow some money. So I like to build in the idea of there's some kind of car payment already. And this is kind of a common way that I bring that up to clients. Let's just go ahead and start adding more to your 401k, your mortgage, so that when you do need a car, we'll shave that out, start putting that towards that car payment, and it's not going to affect your budget. Again, bringing it back to what I said in the beginning, the foundation of a financial plan is cash flow. So let's jump back into retirement. What are some things that we can do for Dan and Alice? As it stands right now with these goals, they're at about a 25% probability. And obviously we want to get that a little higher. So what if we increase our contributions by 5% each? We'll take Dan up to 15. We'll take Alice up to 10. And initially, what if we just said, let's spend a little bit less in retirement? How does that look? Okay. One thing I did fail to mention is they're currently very nervous about the investments. They are very conservative. They pretty much have everything just in the bond fund that they've got in their 401k plan. Based on their age and their time frame, it's going to be important that they bring in a little more risk. Not taking it all the way out to being as aggressive as you can, but something that's going to be more in tune with what their age would be. Just a moderate portfolio. What happens there? What is the outcome of just changing the portfolio scenario? Just that alone right there brings us up. And again, we're not jumping in 100% equities. We're just basically taking them from having a zero risk environment to about a middle of the road moderate portfolio. So in those two scenarios alone, we were able to take them from 25% probability all the way up to 82 without changing their overall goal of retiring in 10 years. Again, circumstances bring up, what if we want to retire early? How do we make that happen? What if we want to retire a year earlier than that? How would that change my scenario? 1 year alone is pretty significant change. What if we said, okay, Mike, we don't need as much money? What if we only needed $5,500? Well, that brings us back to a great situation. This is where we get to have that conversation, the starting point to say, all right, what are you willing to accept? What are you willing to trade off? We didn't have infinite amounts of money like most of us do. So this just gives you an idea of what are some scenarios of how you work through with a client, how you work through with an advisor, of what can we do differently to get us to our ultimate goal down the road. So that's Dan and that's Alice. Bring it back to that last slide deck. And yeah, so there we go. We're just gonna talk about rebalancing the portfolio, bringing on just a little bit more risk, but not a whole lot. With that amount of time, again, a lot can change when it comes to the overall stock market. Increasing our contributions by 5%. If we can't do that right away, I'd encourage you to increase your contributions 1% a year until we hopefully max that out. Adjust our cash flow in retirement, maybe reduce our income need by about 500, and then as we get paying more towards that mortgage, we'll be able to replace that vehicle that they were talking about as well.
We had a fun comment just saying, "Oh, I wish I had $1,000 mortgage payment." Of course, this is just an example, and obviously, if you're doing your financial plan, you'd put in your actual mortgage payment and get real numbers for yourself. And I'm assuming there are lots of people out there with $1,000 mortgage payments.
Well, in their situation, being empty nesters, their situation was they're in the same house they bought 20 years ago. The world's changed quite a bit. Yeah. So that's the scenario that was kind of painted for them.
Thanks for those comments. Keep them coming. It does keep it lively here. So we appreciate those. Let's move on to our next case study. Here we go. Yeah. So here's Susan. She's single. She's 63. She's hoping to retire here in the next couple of years. She's got about $110 salary. She's paid off her mortgage. Unsure about when to take Social Security. That's a question mark that a lot of folks have. It's funny about Social Security in the sense that you either know everything about it or you know nothing about it. And the reason why is because until you're actually going to talk to someone about it, there's no need, because it's going to change. It's going to adjust. There used to be options to pick from years ago that aren't available now. So oftentimes, unless you're right on the verge or you know someone that's about to retire, you probably don't know a whole lot about the options. So just quickly to kind of talk about that, not to spend too much time on it, but when it comes to Social Security, everyone has what's called their full retirement age. When you hit that age and you start taking Social Security, you could still be working. Now, if you decided to take Social Security early, you can start drawing it at 62. If you're still working, however, it impacts what kind of benefits you can get. There's a max on what you can make outside of Social Security before it's being impacted. Every year that you wait to take Social Security from age full retirement up to age 70, which is the max, your benefit increases by 8% compound. And the same thing happens on the opposite. If you decide to take it early, your benefit is reduced based on what your full retirement amount would be. So in this situation, Susan, she's looking at, she's 63. Her full retirement age is 66. She's going to get 110 salary. What do we need to do differently, and where can we go from there? Let me just jump back over and steal the screen back from you, Marchette. All right, here's Susan. Susan's been a good saver. She owns her own home.
her balance sheet's pretty nice, but this probability of success is not good. What are some things that we can do differently in the short amount of time that we've got? So one of the things that's always hard is having a conversation with a client when I have to actually tell them no. But this is something that you want to hear from your advisor. You want to hear your advisors tell you the honest truth, whether it's a good truth or a bad truth. So she's 2 years out. She's making contributions. She told me what her income need would be. She's hoping to retire at 65. So just to kind of start jumping into the hard truth part of the conversation, we need to start saving a little bit more. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it's going to make some. And if nothing else, 2 years out. She does have a match at work, so that's helpful. But this is a conversation where we have to say, what happens if we don't get the full 5? Those 2 things right there bring it up to a much, much better scenario. Bringing it out to age 67 makes it even better. And changing her, making sure her allocation is, again, in line with her age demographic and where she needs to be are all really important elements. Now, the full retirement age part, we were talking about that a little bit. What happens if we take Social Security when she can at age her full retirement age 66? What happens if we change that scenario altogether? Why am I not getting that tool? I got to go back here. Again, when I create people like this, some things don't always work the way you're expecting. So her situation, full retirement benefit was $3,000. I use that based on my experience of people of that income bracket. Oh, here we go. If we were to defer and say we're going to take Social Security at 70 versus early, this brings us up to a much more comfortable number. This works out in her situation because she's really close to retirement. Often, and she's not drawing early. A lot of folks, when they're in a situation where they can draw early, retire at 62, and not actually work, more often than not, the numbers show us that taking it as early as you can gives us your better probability of success. The reason why is because you're not having to draw down on your assets for 6 to 10 years. That really changes the long run picture. Taking it early, if it's possible, and you don't necessarily you don't have to have a side job. I've seen that work out. In this situation, deferring it all the way out to age 70 is without question her best case scenario. I did throw in the idea of what if, there's, again, I mentioned before, there's products in the marketplace that fit in certain circumstances, and sometimes they don't. One of those is a type of annuity that you buy. It's called a single premium immediate annuity. We call them SPIAs in the industry. It's basically buying a pension. It's turning over a chunk of money and saying, I want to have a check deposited to my checking account for the rest of my life, regardless of when that happens. You lose access to the big chunk, but you know that money is never going to go away. Doesn't matter how old you are. So I'm going to be bouncing around here in this tool for a second, but just to kind of show you some scenarios of what happens if we turned and bought a $300,000 single premium annuity. What would that do? How would my world change? Do you remember we were 84% on the last time we looked at it? When we bring it back up, in this situation, it actually gives us a slightly less of probability. of success, given the fact that we gave up a chunk of money, but we know that money is going to be coming. It brought us down to a dollar amount. This number here, by the way, this is how much money is going to be left at the end of your plan. Right now, we use 90 as our age at which we end the plan. Also, just to keep in mind too, this factors in healthcare costs of around $5,000 a year, as well as a long-term care need in the last 2 years of your plan as well. So a lot of what ifs that are already kind of built in to this probability of success. So the idea of getting an annuity, while it gives you the peace of mind today, sometimes it changes your probability down the road. Again, they're not bad or good in and of themselves. They're just whether or not they're appropriate. And this is a conversation that I like to have with clients to say, is this more important? Is leaving more money to your family more important? And there's ways around and ways to solve for both. So bringing it back to our slide, are there any, first of all, are there any questions that
Yeah, I think you already addressed the one question that someone had about, like, does this tool assume what your death date will be? I'm assuming that is also adjustable. So for example, in my family, we're extremely long-lived. Everyone in my family just expects to live for a long time. So we're making decisions based on that.
Yeah.
And so, that statistic you said about a lot of people living to 100, I'm like, oh, it's not going to be me. So that's something to think about as well.
And people are just living longer than they've ever thought they would live these days. My responsibility is to be the advocate of the 20-year older version of yourself from yourself. So oftentimes I feel like I'm standing there protecting the 20-year-old version of you, 20-year older version of you from today's version of you. So that's the goal, that's the plan. And sometimes I can bring good news, and sometimes, unfortunately, I have to deliver some not so good news. But hopefully, we have enough time, lead time, to make some adjustments. And here's the one thing I'll also throw out there. Human nature, we build lifestyles around our income. If you make $80,000 a year, you build a lifestyle around $80,000 a year. If you make $180,000 a year, you build a lifestyle around $180,000 a year. If you make $1 million a year, you create lifestyles around this. So that's the case. And if we know with enough lead time, in Susan's case, if we know that $4,000 is where she needs to be, we've got some lead time to help her adjust and make adjustments to a lifestyle that's like that. Or in turn, be able to make decisions to adjust for that as well. Maybe she decides to keep working to age 70. That could be a scenario as well. A lot of what ifs, a lot of various cases that kind of come into play. But having some information in your hand with rates of return, with reasonable outcomes, with some what if scenarios is way better than having no idea. It's there's the statement that's out there that says, even if you don't have a plan, without any plan, it's a plan to fail. So just some things to consider, some examples of some people that I've seen over the years, and then what to expect and how you work with a financial advisor.
Well, we got some more questions in here, but I'd like to maybe do some wrap up, and then we'll go into our question and answer portion. And so I'm going to save your question. If you're waiting for Mike to answer those, just hold tight. Let's go ahead and finish up our slides, and then we'll launch into some more questions.
Yeah, great. So when we get our plan set up, you sit down, you build out your plan. This isn't something that we set on the shelf and forget about. This is something that needs to be reviewed. Sometimes it's something that we update every 6 months. Sometimes it's something we update annually. But oftentimes during review meetings with clients, I'm trying to answer one of two questions. What's changed in your world? And what's changed in mine? And typically when there's a change significant enough in either of those two, we either point to the portfolio or we point to the plan and make adjustments from there. It might be that you decide you want to move. It might be that you got a job change, whether you like it or not. It might be that a new baby's on the way. It might be something even worse happen, life-changing event, something in your family passes away. Typically, those are circumstances where you need to pivot back to the plan, update, and kind of see how things stand. So that's typically how often you want to review it. It's not something you need to do every quarter by any measure. There's not enough change that happens on a quarterly basis. But I'd say on average, I'd say 12 to 18 months is a healthy time to review your financial plan.
All right, we're going to go ahead and open the floor up for some more questions. I know we've gotten some already, and this is the time for you to ask Mike some questions about financial planning. Here's our first one. How much does it impact on how good your plan turns out if you have a plan based on retirement at a different age than the age you actually end up retiring? So you make a big deal of deciding ahead of, would you make a big deal of deciding ahead of time when you intend to retire?
Does it make a big, how much does impact on how you do it?
So I guess the question is, how much of you're adjusting retirement age? How big of an impact does that make? And then I guess as someone comes closer to retirement, at what point do you decide, oh, I had planned for this age, but now I'm going to do a different age? Can you talk about the decision-making process?
The further out the plan is, the more wiggle room you always have, of course. As we can see with Susan's case, the closer you get, the more significant those changes are. And to be honest, that's going to be a case-by-case answer, and I'd hate to say one way or the other. But I guess generally speaking, having an idea of what that plan looks like, with as much lead time as possible, the better. I'm not sure how well I answered your question there, Greg, but be more than happy to talk offline if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah. Well, and I guess as you approach closer, you have more solid numbers, so you'll know for sure. Okay, I was planning at retiring at 67, but hey,
Mhm.
I'm going to be okay. I can retire now, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking. And it's a decision. I have friends that are currently retiring, and so it's funny having a conversation with them. They're like, "Well, I talked to my advisor, and we decided maybe 6 more months and then I can go part-time." And so it's really interesting to see that collaboration in their lives and how excited they are about that new stage of their life.
Mhm. One of the conversations that I like to have with folks as they're entering retirement and actually flipping that switch is to prepare you for something that you didn't think about. And it kind of hits you, not immediately, but if you don't talk about it in advance, 6 months go by. Up until you retire, you've been in accumulation mode. You've been in saving mode the whole time. In the back of your mind, you know that some of your money is going into an account for down the road. Well, guess what, folks? We're down the road. And you're no longer in saving mode. You've been used to seeing your accounts go up by two things: performance and contributions. Well, we're taking one of those away. And during the periods like we're in right now, we're taking the other one away too temporarily. So you might have this sense of anxiety, sense of nervousness when you're not saving, but recognize that if you planned well for it, it's okay. It's okay now to be in that distribution side of life. So talking about it up front, tackling those hard questions head on are really important. And bringing up those kinds of things with clients is a benefit that you get by working with a financial advisor.
All right, here's another question. How do you actually calculate your expenses in retirement? So they must have noticed, like that 6,000, you suggest, oh, maybe you are only spending 5,500 in retirement. How do you actually make those calculations?
It's a budgeting conversation. We take into consideration what expenses will be there, what won't. A lot of the times we're using the basic needs of food and gas and travel and all the things that you think you need to spend in terms of today's dollars. Hopefully there's not a mortgage anymore. So we'll take those out. But usually, again, back to the lifestyle question, the conversation that I mentioned before, usually they're already in a certain level of a lifestyle. Most people will have a various form of fixed income as it is, in the form of a pension or not a pension, but in the form of a salary or a living wage. So that is the baseline for what their budget is. So we usually take today's expenses, strip out some of the things that will be gone during retirement, reduce it a little bit because if there's kids in the house, we're not going to have those types of expenses, hopefully. There are the boomerangers that come back every now and again that you don't really know if that actually is going to happen. So you have to, that we got to roll with the punch on that. And that's where when you revisit the financial plan you update on a regular basis, that's where you update those numbers.
All right. And then one other question here. How much does current market conditions factor into a financial plan?
Current market conditions typically don't factor in a lot, typically. Okay. It all depends on how much of a glide path we have for retirement. If I'm talking with a 45-year-old, even a 55-year-old, we've run financial plans in 2020. We updated them in the midst of COVID, and their retirement plan, they went from, I'll use some rough numbers here, 86% down to 83% in the midst of a major market correction. So typically, current market conditions don't impact because we're looking at longer periods, much longer periods of time. The average market return over the last 40 years is somewhere between, depending on how aggressive you are, 9 and 11%. That takes into consideration the .com, the Great Recession, COVID, took into consideration the dip in 2018. All those factored in, we still have decent market returns. So again, working with a financial advisor, the goal is to be that calming voice in the storm. And at the same time, when people are asking you about, oh, should we buy crypto? Let's just pump the brakes on things. Let's not get too excited about when things are going up, and let's not get too concerned about when things are going down.
All right, we just got in another question about just the challenge. You talked a little bit about long-term healthcare needs. So planning for that, can you talk a little bit about planning for long-term care needs if you get ill or you need care in your later years?
Sure. That's probably one of the biggest what ifs that you're going to face. There are things that you can do to plan for it. The standard long-term care insurance policies of old, those are always available, the Cadillac versions of that. There's other options where there are, it's not a use it or lose it scenario like homeowners insurance would be per se, where you can reallocate a portion of your assets that gives you leverage against that to be able to pay for long-term care. But if you don't ever go into it, the beneficiaries, are still able to get access to it. Statistically speaking, 1 in 3 people are probably going to need some type of long-term care assistance, whether it's nursing home, at-home care, the spouse helps out at home, someone comes over just to do some light cleaning and go do some grocery shopping just to help you out. There's a lot of stuff that comes into play when it comes to long-term care, but it's definitely something that we have to factor in. That's the reason why I always add in 2 years worth of it at the end of the plan, just to create that what if scenario.
All right. Well, that's a good place to end. Good thing to think about. I know that we've had lots of comments. We want to thank everyone for being so participatory today. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Let me pop up Michael's picture again. Thank you, Michael, for being a great presenter. We're getting some thank
Thank you.
yous in the comment. You got a brilliant today, so that's pretty great.
All right. Two
Thank-
thumbs up. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here, and we will see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.